Hi, everybody. My name's Karen Copeland. I'm the CEO of CreateXChange. So we create, I think hopefully a lot of you know who we are, but we create a learning experiences using global thought leaders to bring the business and the creative community together so they can learn from each other. Everyone talks so much about innovation, and the only way really to get true innovation is diversity of thought. We've had the opportunity to have incredible speakers like Simon Sinek, Amy Cuddy, Malcolm Gladwell, Sir Ken Robinson, and now Jim McKelvey. But the CreateXChange, the X is where all the action happens. It's the intersection of ideas coming together. We call ourselves cultural futurists. I've spent 18 years as a consumer product designer, industrial designer, and then 15 years running a nonprofit. So I particularly love Jim's story. Again, the idea of bringing the business and creative community together, because that's, again, where so much innovation happens. So before we get started, I know, and Grace, I mean, Nellie was able to, Nellie Arnold, I know you met Nellie and Lee, and I'm going to introduce you to Grace right now. So we really want this to be a super interactive experience, and bear with us as this is about our fifth one, but we're still learning, and we thank you so much for being a part of our experiment, our great experiment. So I wanted first to introduce you to Grace Migliaccio from Pipeline Human Capital Solution. Grace is a seasoned training designer and facilitator, has a passion for growing companies and their people. So she's sat at the top HR seat inside really amazing growth companies, both large and small. She spent a lot of her career at Walt Disney World, and she grew up being CHRO for several companies. So I wanted to introduce Grace to you, just so give her an idea of what we're going to do with some of the breakout rooms. So go ahead, Grace.
Hi, everybody. We're going to have one breakout room in the middle, and we got some feedback early on that people really wanted to network, like in the old days where you got to exchange business cards. Well, this is our virtual version of that. So when we break you out into a smaller group, we ask you to do two things. The first one is introduce yourselves to one another like in the old days and just network. And the second is we'd like you to formulate some questions that you can ask our guest, Jim, about growing your business through these extraordinary times. So we'd like you to work together so that we don't get the same question over and over, and come up with a couple of questions that later in the session you'll pose to our guest. Thanks.
Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Jim McKelvey. Okay, so Jim, he wrote the book called Innovation Stack. He is a serial entrepreneur, inventor, philanthropist, artist, and author of the Innovation Stack, building an unbelievable business, one crazy idea at a time. He is also the co-founder of Square, so he's even super busy, even busier now, and served as the chairman of its board until 2010, and still serves as board of directors. 2011, his iconic card reader design was inducted in the Museum of Modern Art. He founded Invisibly, an ambitious project to rewire the economics of online content in 2016. He is also deputy chair of the St. Louis Federal Reserve. So before Jim gets on, I want to tell everybody that Jim, I've worked with a lot of new authors, and Jim just launched this book on March 10th, The Innovation Stack. So talk about someone that's had to pivot. Usually when we have new authors, they're traveling all over the world in person. So Jim had to really, from the very get-go, have to deal with this incredible, book launch in a very, very different way. So, hey, Jim, I just wanted you to just introduce yourself and let's get started.
Yeah, Karen, ironically, there's a section in the book on timing.
Right. Yep.
There's like a whole chapter on timing, and I chose the worst day in a century to launch a new book. Like March 10th was the absolute worst. The virus was locking everybody down. It couldn't have been worse. But ironically, it's the topic is more relevant than ever, because it turns out that people who I think would not have been interested in entrepreneurial activities because what they were doing was working so well, are now sort of being forced into it. And a lot of the people that I study in the book are like that. They're folks who have been forced into this reaction to a harsh environment. And if you look at some of the great companies, they're not run by volunteers, they're run by survivors.
There's by survivors. And also, I mean, as tough as a huge tough of a time as is for creatives and people that like to reinvent, this has kind of been an incredible time to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't want to sugarcoat this stuff. Like it's terrible. And I hang out with a lot of people who are, you know, really unemployed and really scared. And yet what's happening here is an acceleration of change, and that disproportionately favors entrepreneurs.
Right.
You take a system that's working well, that's going to favor the big companies and the establishment.
Right.
Entrepreneurs, at least the way I use the definition, these are people who are trying to do something that's totally new.
Right.
If you're trying to doing something that's totally new, you're going to be in a disrupted environment anyway.
Right,
So
exactly.
additional disruption of having the world's economy shut down, I mean, it sucks, but it actually sucks less for an entrepreneur than for everybody else.
Right, and a blunt the overhead. First, before we get into that, I just kind of wanted to give the background of the fact that you were a glassblower and the founder of a major payments company. So I think let's give everybody that background perspective of your background. And so go ahead.
So I've made stuff out of glass for 30 years. It's how I funded my first startup. I've taught it. I think I have the #1 textbook in glass blowing. So if I timed that one right, published that in 2006. But I love making stuff with glass, and I love selling my glass. And I was trying to sell a piece of glass when I lost a sale, and that frustrated me enough because the reason I lost a sale was because I couldn't take a credit card payment.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my customer on one of these things, and she couldn't pay me, and I lost a sale, and I was pissed. And I called up my friend Jack Dorsey. Jack and I had actually already agreed to start a company together, but we didn't have an idea yet. And so I said, hey, we should fix this problem that I know I have. Now, the thing I didn't know was if anybody else had it, but that's what became Square.
Yeah, that's really so. Okay, now that you wrote this book, The Innovation Stack. So now that you have it out there, like, do you think about the addendum to it, or like the fact that like?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about two things. One is that there should be another chapter in the book, which is the observation that I pointed this out, but I didn't actually dedicate a chapter to it. And that is many of the world's greatest entrepreneurs, and I mean people who've created their entirely new industries, have not been volunteers. In other words, they were people who, for one reason or another, got pushed into entrepreneurship by a harsh environment.
Right.
And the reason that's an important message is because so much of the time we tell this hero story about entrepreneurs, and we think, oh, these are, you know, visionaries who are younger or smarter or more dedicated or more prescient than we are. And it makes us feel as individuals like we couldn't do something like that.
Right,
okay?
right.
And like if you study history, what you'll find is that those hero stories are told by second parties.
Yeah.
The people themselves, the individuals, if you actually look at their lives and read their autobiographies, or in some cases meet them as I did, they're extremely humble, and they will admit that what they did was just react to a harsh environment.
Yeah.
I think that's a super positive message right now, because we're all in a very harsh environment.
Yeah, and so I know a lot of people are coming to you right now with to answer questions about their small business and being self-employed. I mean, I assume that you're spending a lot of time with that. Yeah,
so I see it. I'm a director of the Fed now, so I see it both from the side of the Federal Reserve, and then a director of Square, so I see it from, you know, supplying small businesses. And then of course I'm a small business person myself, so I'm personally in it. Yes, it's super rough. Although I will say this, the companies that are innovative are just kicking ass right now.
Yeah.
And it's a very small subset, Karen, because like what we call innovation or what we call entrepreneurship is a much broader definition than it used to be. So entrepreneurship used to mean only people who were doing things that hadn't been done before in business.
Yeah.
It was this very narrow definition. So if you opened a coffee shop, you were not an entrepreneur. If you opened a car company, you were not an entrepreneur. If you opened an airplane company, unless it was like the first airplane company, you were not an entrepreneur. Over the last 100 years, the word has been broadened to include basically anyone who starts a business. But most businesses are unoriginal. And I'm not being judgmental here. Most businesses should be unoriginal. So like headsets. I bought a headset.
Right.
Guess what? Nothing is unique about this headset. I mean, it's a good headset, but the person who came up with that and the ear pads and all, this is a copy. This is a copy of hundreds of predecessors.
Yeah.
Copying is almost always the best way to do something that has been done before. But entrepreneurship becomes necessary when you're dealing with a new problem.
Right. But also, it's also, how do you look about like companies like yourself that Square has been around? I mean, everybody's coming up with new business models now, like all new business models.
Oh my God. We're seeing
and that's what's so interesting. It's like everybody has to, in some respect. I mean, is there anybody that doesn't have to come up with a whole new business model?
So today, Square is running a hackathon for programmers who want to help small businesses.
Yeah.
Because we've been kicking out probably a new product every 2 days since the crisis started.
Right.
I mean, not a full line of new products, but like some major, but a lot of just little tweaks and things. And, you know, now you can do curbside pickup super easily.
Right.
We've got contactless payment, which we've had before, but, you know, we're adapting as quickly as we can, but we're not adapting fast enough. So we've opened up our software stack to developers who want to help more. And you need that. I mean, especially
right. It's busier than ever because you look at, as everybody tries to open and all the curbside stuff, the restaurants everywhere, like I figure, like I said, you're in it. You're in it.
Oh, I live it.
You're living that every single day. And I mean, a lot of us are as well, but just developing those new products. And so I think what I want you to do now is talk to people about what is an innovation stack.
So an innovation stack, first let me tell you how I stumbled on it, okay? Because I didn't want to write a book. And by the way, this book is not a memoir. It's basically this thing that I had to write because I couldn't explain how Square survived Amazon.
Yeah. Right.
So when Square was 4 years old, we had a good product, but Amazon did what they frequently do, which they copied our product, undercut our price, and expected us to die.
Right.
And
any innovator kind of like that.
It's terrifying. So Amazon's probably the scariest competitor on the planet.
Yeah.
And when they did this to every other company that we studied, the company lost. So Amazon had 100% success with this strategy. Copy, undercut the price, watch them die.
Yeah.
And they did this to us. We were still a startup and we expected, frankly, to die. I mean, like that was the prediction based on history, but we didn't. Like we survived this assault by Amazon. And amazingly, after about a year, Amazon gave up and they were really cool about it. They mailed one of these little Square readers to all of their former customers.
Yeah.
They just said, well, they said, we're out, use Square, which I thought was really cool. So I'm not knocking Amazon. They were cool about the way they, you know, cleaned up. Plus it's really stupid to knock Amazon if you're selling a book.
Right. Well, we a lot of times use the independent booksellers.
Yeah, you know, I prefer you buy from your local bookstore, but they're close.
We do. We actually do. We support the local bookstores.
Yeah. But so I was happy we won, but I was totally baffled why we won. Like what was special about Square? Yeah. And so I went on this 3-year research quest looking for any other companies that this had happened to. And it turns out that there are not a lot of them, but if you look back in history, there are many examples of exactly the same thing happening. And I mean, almost exactly the same thing that happened to Square. And so what protects these companies is this thing called an innovation stack. And an innovation stack is the natural result of tackling a problem that's never been solved before.
Yeah.
And it's a fundamentally different process that I'd never heard it discussed. So I did all this research, and then I took all this research to a guy who'd actually lived through it. It was Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines.
I actually met him in Philadelphia one time. That was incredible. I saw that you have a story about him, and I got the chance to meet him in Philadelphia.
Herb's awesome. And the thing about Herb is he was the one that told me to write the book. Like, I did all this research, and I just wanted to know if I was right. But the thing about historical research is that you can delude yourself, because you can cherry pick examples that sort of support your thesis.
Yeah.
And that's different from taking your thesis to somebody who's lived through it and say, Herb, is this right? So I took all my research down to Dallas, and I spent a day with Herb, and the guy, you know, smoked 2 packs of Cool Menthols, and basically at the end,
oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, he's like, you got it. He pointed out a few things that I missed, which, I mean, he's Herb Kelleher, like, of course he's going to do that. And then he says, you got to write this. And I was so excited that I went out and I decided I got to write a book, but I'm not going to write a boring business book.
Yeah.
What I'm going to write is a graphic novel. So I put the whole thing into this cartoon format and spent a year doing this. And I was so excited to show it to Herb. And I called Herb and I was like, you're going to love this. It's a graphic novel. It's not like this boring business thing. Herb hated the idea.
Really?
He did not like that. He thought it was trivializing a very important subject. He basically said he wanted no part of it if I was going to make it a cartoon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is Herb Kelleher. I mean, he's a legend. So I rewrote the book, and I basically cut out half the cartoons and turned it into text. I submitted this to my publisher, and then my publisher looked at it and said, you can't have a book that's half text and half cartoons, because that'll never sell, because everyone uses e-readers and audiobooks, which don't work with graphics. So it now became just a textbook. But the innovation stack is this thing that you build because you need to solve a problem. And it's usually not 1 or 2 inventions. In the case of Southwest, it was about 15. In the case of Bank of America, which was at one time the biggest bank in the world, started by a produce vendor, started by a guy who sold lettuce. This was his job. He sold lettuce and oranges. Builds the biggest bank in the world by doing 20 things differently. Square had 14 things in our innovation stack. And so I take you through the process of how invention works. And you know, it's a lot less intimidating when you break a company down into a lot of little sort of obvious. I mean, a lot of this stuff is really obvious.
Obvious, yeah.
And I think it makes it more accessible, because like, if you think that it's going to take a genius to solve the world's problems, you're really eliminating all of us who don't think we're geniuses. And I've never thought I was a genius, but I'm actually very stubborn.
Right.
So if you say, well, it's going to require genius, I go, find somebody else. But if you say, look, this just needs somebody who will do something 20 times until it works, I'm your guy.
Yeah,
you know?
Right. I love that. I love how you talked about stubbornness. What was one of the things you had? It was a funny thing you had about stubbornness. Of like, entrepreneurs, it's just all about, it's like pain in the ass, stubborn, all sorts of things.
Well, yeah, I mean,
entrepreneur is.
So it turns out that in addition to being a person who's stubborn, I'm also a person that has motivational problems.
Yeah.
You know, like, once I grab hold of a problem, I don't let go. But a lot of times I just get depressed and stay in bed and don't want to go to work. And, you know, I mean, I got all sorts of motivational issues. So one of the ways I personally solve the motivation problem is to pick a problem that I genuinely care about that gives me a little more energy.
Yeah.
And then the stubbornness kicks in when I realize if I don't solve the problem, my business is going to die.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's that sort of fear of being wiped out that keeps me going.
It keeps you going. So when you talk about, have there been any new perfect problems like you found during the crisis? Yeah,
there have been a couple. So I coined this term called the perfect problem. And what I mean by that is, think of the world of problems. and you can divide them into the stuff we've solved and the stuff we haven't solved. Okay, well, the stuff we solved, great. Copy the solution for somebody who solved it. Like I'm sitting in a chair right now. The chair's working great. The chair's a solved problem, okay? Actually, everything in my room is pretty much a solved problem. There's nothing original in this room. It's all been copied from something else.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's a good way to solve a previously solved problem. Okay, so then let's consider the unsolved problems. Well, those are interesting because you can divide that group into two things as well. The unsolved and unsolvable problems. In other words, we can't do this yet. So I'd love to be able to teleport, or I'll give you an, you know, I'll give you an example of an unsolved problem. Vaccine for COVID-19.
Right.
Don't have it. I believe we will have it. Okay. I'm actually doing a bunch of medical research support right now, and things are looking pretty good in the labs of WashU. We got some good stuff. So I believe that is a solvable problem, and that to me is the perfect problem. If you look at those things that we could do, but have not yet been done, that's a good place to focus energy. So I call those perfect problems. And I found a couple. One is I think we've got a massive problem with journalism. And journalism right now is something that we all want. And by journalism, I mean people investing time to create quality content.
Right.
And we have an economic
Well,
problem.
how do you define quality content? Because it's different for everybody.
Well, it's different for everybody, but that's the point. So I'll use an example. Let's define quality food. Okay. So if you're a vegan and I'm on a paleo diet, we have basically completely opposite definitions of quality food. But yet we have a market for food that allows both of us to go out and buy the stuff that we want and eat the stuff we want. If you want to eat cheap stuff, you can eat cheap stuff. You want to eat fancy stuff, you can eat fancy stuff. But there's a market for that. But what's going on in the content world is because almost all content is advertising supported. Advertising only monetizes per second, which would be like selling food by the calorie, okay? Or by the pound. Like if all food was like $10 a pound, you would have no fancy food. You would have a lot of cheap, heavy food.
Right.
And that's effectively what's being produced for our minds as opposed to for our bodies. And I think there's a way to solve this. I don't know what it is yet, but I've been spending 3 years on it. I've burned through about $20 million trying to fix that problem. It is not going well. But I think we're onto something. I think we'll get it, but it's been a tough problem to solve.
Yeah. So as the dust clears in the presently into a new, like, how do you believe the world of entrepreneurship will maybe have changed in a meaningful way? Like, what is your dream?
So I think we're living through a rapid acceleration. So as I said before, I think the environment of chaos, which we're all in right now, favors the entrepreneur. The second thing you're going to see is just massive acceleration of trends that would have, normally taken a decade to unfold, will unfold in 6 months. So that's really positive. I also think that there is going to be a massive opportunity set created by something that I, discuss in the book, because people always come to me with ideas. This pissed me off last week. This guy, really smart person, wants to open a business. And he doesn't have any ideas. He's like, and the problem with that is that you tend to want to copy as a human. We want to copy stuff that already works. So he wants to go out and build a business that's already been built. Like build a SaaS fintech company. Okay, fine. There's a formula for that. By the way, I can tell you the formula for that if you care for it. But like the point is, that's not terribly creative. And this guy was so good that I thought, man, I would like his talents working on something that hasn't been solved yet, as opposed to a solved problem. Well, how does this relate? If you look at the world of opportunity, most of the companies that I studied for the innovation stack, and this was really interesting to me, always attacked the market at its lowest point. So take Southwest Airlines. If you remember Southwest Airlines, which started really flying in 1970. They were not taking passengers from the major airlines. They were taking passengers from the buses. Greyhound and Trailways bus lines was losing their riders to the airlines because for the first time, normal people could afford to fly. You know, and a ticket on United was $400. This was before airline deregulation. A ticket on Southwest was like $60. Right. You know, so you could afford to go visit your grandparents. You know, totally transformed the market, but it transformed it by creating a totally new market at the bottom. We did the same thing at Square. Square took credit card processing, which basically was limited to businesses that did $100,000 a year in sales, and we brought it down to people who did basically $1 a year in sales. Like there was no bottom to Square. It was free to sign up. Everything was free, so we didn't even care if you used it. So you asked me about what the virus is going to do. What the virus I think is going to do is, and this is possibly really positive, it's going to disrupt a lot of the clubby, exclusionary systems that have been in place. So like country clubs, you can go to the country club, any clubs in general, elite institutions, cities, like, hey, if you can afford to live in New York City or Palo Alto, you're doing pretty well. Yeah. Because, you know, a studio apartment there is over $3 grand. A lot of people who have the talent to compete in that world don't have the bucks to live in that world. Yeah. Well, we are now breaking those clubby things. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you.
I love that too. Because it evens the playing field. It's become like the great equalizer. You know, I think it's kind of become this great equalizer, which I think is really, really fascinating. So I love that you say that. I want to be aware of time. I wanted to ask you just one more question before we do the breakouts, and then everybody's going to come back and engage in question. I love when you talked about of trust as a precious and delicate thing. And so do you have any insights to offer, you know, when it comes to leveraging or strengthening or of course destroying that, especially right now, you know, like in this time?
Yeah, so trust is one of these things that is very, very difficult to acquire because it is built up by good behavior over long periods of time.
Yeah.
Except in times of crisis, it's like trust goes on sale. Like it's buy one, get one free on trust right now. Because, no, let me tell you what's going on.
No, it's got a while.
When somebody is in crisis, when somebody is scared, their brain changes. And when you're scared, you are looking for trustworthy, reliable, helpful resources, people, hopefully, companies, possibly. But that's the moment that a company or an individual, it doesn't have to be, you know, your corporate self. It can be you. Like, just go help a neighbor. Like, go help a neighbor who, you know, is over 60 and afraid to go pick up food. Yeah. You know, go help a neighbor who can't mow their lawn or is afraid to, you know, go to the grocery store. You know, or you can be a neighbor as a corporation. I mean, like Square basically took all of our SaaS products, which these little companies had been paying us for to run their businesses, and we just made it free. Yeah. You know, it's not going to be free forever. Okay. We will go back to making money from our products. But right now, when everyone's desperate, we had sort of two choices, I guess three, maybe. One was do nothing. That's always a choice. The other one was, jack up the prices because, hey, everybody needs our stuff. Let's milk them. We did the opposite. We said, let's take our price to zero because right now when everybody needs our things is the time that we should step up, and Square's in a position to do this. So we did it. And I think, I mean, it's altruistic to an extent, but it's also very self-serving because these people will now have a very, very positive view of Square, which would normally take us a decade to cultivate. Right. We can do that in 2 months. I mean, trust is on sale right now.
Yeah, I love that. Trust is on sale right now. Okay, so, all right, guys, so get ready for, thank you so much, Jim, but we're going to be back. We're going to do a little Zooming so everybody can get to know each other. And then we come back, we're going to call on people and they can put their questions, and then they'll be able to ask you questions.
Okay.
Zoom away,
while-
Billy.
So
All
while
right,
we're gonna send you guys into your break rooms in a few seconds. So what's gonna happen is we've randomly assigned y'all break rooms. Go in there. You have 5 minutes to introduce yourselves as well as brainstorm some questions for Jim. And we'll see you back.
Laptop or a desktop.
There's Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi,
How you
Karen.
doing?
Great to see you. Great to see many of you.
Too. Thanks for being here.
And thank you to Jim for being here.
Yeah.
I've been a big fan of Square. Used it myself for my business, my clients. I'm a small business attorney, so I work with lots of startups. My question, which you, yeah, right. I see a client waving there. Thanks, Nelly. The shout out. My question that I put in the chat earlier was, you kind of addressed it a little bit when you talked about Palo Alto and living and being in different places, but how today in this environment, maybe for the unforeseeable future, next 3 to 6 to 9 months, how can entrepreneurs who have a great idea find access to venture capital or angel investing, since we're all kind of in our homes? This is obviously an opportunity, these networking events, but what suggestions might you have for the entrepreneurs on the line who we just didn't even in our break room just talked about that? What would you suggest to getting noticed, approaching venture capitalists when we're all kind of stuck in our home?
So a couple of things. First of all, I run a VC fund. I'm a general partner at a VC fund. It's sort of a hobby. It's not what I do for a living, but I do sort of work at least part of my time during the week on this. So I'm actually qualified to answer this question. I'm not always qualified to answer the questions that I'm given. But in this case, I can tell you, Michael, that a couple of things. First of all, the word on the street is that money has gotten 3 times as expensive. Okay. So that's just the rule of thumb. In other words, deals that we were doing have become much more heavily scrutinized. There ain't no more vision funds. Let me put it that way. You know that vision fund that you say, oh, $100 billion, I can get some of that? Yeah, ain't happening, right? And we've seen their results too. So what's happening now in venture capital is a strong shift to companies that have proven models and are growing. So, you know, one of the things that I've always been amazed with is how insanely cheap it is to start a company. Okay. So Square, and this is just the facts these days, like Square started, you know, basically with my savings and Jack's savings. And, you know, Jack had some money from Twitter and I had some money from glass blowing and a few other things that I'd done, but we were not like super rich. And we had the basic tech working in 3 weeks. And that was hardware, software, moving money off your credit card into my bank account. Granted, it was illegal, but it worked. And it was super cheap. So what I would say is if you have taken your product to the point where it actually works and you can do a demo, then you could probably get funded. But if you're not at that point yet, then it's almost impossible to convince somebody right now to take a flyer on a unproven technology. Now they will invest in proven technologies. And if you sort of, follow my definition of what entrepreneurship is, you might not want to start a company solving a new problem because that's really hard to do. You might just want to copy something that's already been done. The problem with that is you're still in a world where capital is getting really, really pricey. But I get in a lot of trouble for saying this. I've never seen a good company not get funded. Like I just never seen it happen. Like I hear all these stories, these whining people go, oh, well, I'm not connected. And, I don't have rich friends or all these. It's a load of crap. Like I've literally never seen it happen. Now, what I have seen is a lot of people who think the world should give them a bunch of money. And when you actually dig into what they've built, it's mediocre. But never seen a good company not get funded. Just, yeah.
Wow, great. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so where's Tommy Nugent? Is he around?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Hey, Tommy, how are you? I know you had a question.
No, sorry, I didn't have a question. I just made a comment earlier.
Oh, you just made a comment. Okay.
Sorry.
We really loved your comment though. So
that
can
was a
you
good
share it with the
one,
group?
Yeah.
So some books publish like a side PDF, accompanying PDF with graphics. If people want to see that, is that something that was like on the table or that you considered, or maybe that's something you can do post publishing?
Wow, what a great question.
I know it is. Stop, that's hysterical.
Yeah, I'm not going to miss the chance to make a comic book, for God's sake. There's the destruction of California. I don't know if you can see it.
That's
no,
awesome.
like I wanted, this is by the way, chapter 9 of my book. Like, if you read this comic, you do not need to read chapter 9 of the book. And the comic's free because I couldn't get my publisher to go along with it. So I just put it up on my website. So go to jimmckelvey.com and you can download for free chapter 9 of the Innovation Stack and as a graphic novel. Yeah, look, I love this stuff. And frankly, my hope was to convince Herb Kelleher. Like I was basically doing the comic anyway. And I want to get it to the point where it was so cool that I could then fly down to Dallas and show it to Herb and have him change his mind. Because I don't take no for an answer very easily. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Unfortunately, Herb died in the time that I was writing the book.
Yeah.
So he never got to see it. So I never got to change his mind. And then I was stuck with a sort of an ethical question because, you know, like I could have done it anyway, right? Because he's not around, but that would have been so disrespectful. So the reason the book is not a comic is because of my respect for Herb Kelleher, whether or not he's here to see it or not. So, but yeah, there's a comic.
So, Marlene McNamee, I know you had a question.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for taking time.
Hi, Marlene.
How are you, Karen? Thanks for hosting.
Sure.
Jim, question. You claimed yourself as someone that has a hard time getting motivated, but so when you do sit down to do new work, do you have a process around your creativity, around thinking and attacking new problems? Is there something semi-standard that you do to get you in the right place?
Well, two things. The first is I try to have a ton of energy. And that means different things on a different day, you know, so it's all the basic stuff, you know, eat right, sleep, work out, try to associate with positive people, you know, try to not do things that kill your soul, blah, 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 touchy-feely yoga, blah, you know, all that crap. Okay. Whatever gets your energy up. Okay. Then I have a trick. Okay. And the trick is one that I actually got from Jim Collins when he was writing Good to Great. Yeah. We met at a conference. He and I were speaking, and Collins, you know, gave me some advice, and I will give you that advice. And I will also tell you that Collins didn't originate this advice. He got it from Cork Walgreen, of Walgreens drugstore. But the advice is this: make a don't do list. Make a list of the things that you shouldn't be doing, aren't good for you. And the reason the don't do list is more powerful than the to-do list is that if you add something to a to-do list, you're essentially allocating time, and that time has to come from somewhere. And unless you explicitly remove things that are not things worth of your time, you will end up sacrificing your sleep, your family, maybe your health. Like that time's got to come from somewhere. So Collins gave me this trick. I mean, this was back in the early 90s, okay? Or early to mid 90s, probably. I have had a don't do list for now over 20 years.
Wow.
And it's life-changing, flat out life-changing. So what are the things on my don't do list? I don't gas up cars. I don't fill cars up. At the time, the only thing I could do was buy a hybrid that got 70 miles to the gallon, because I was like, I spent a lot of time gassing up my car and I don't want to do that. So I got this like ridiculously high mileage Honda Insight. It looked like a little Tylenol, you know, and a little red Tylenol. These days, I don't watch news. don't do social media. Boy, there's 3 hours of your day back. Like to say I don't do Netflix, but I got kids, so I do Netflix. You know, but you know, like make your own list, and you will get back a ton of time. As a matter of fact, I got back so much time that I started going crazy, and then I had to learn how to play the piano and other stuff because like I had so much time on my hands. I was single at the time, and you go home single without a TV, wow, you'll get a lot done.
Thank you.
I love that. Hey, Amy Patel, you have a question?
Sure. You know, as you develop your ideas and you're trying to build up your business, how do you maintain patience through the process? Because I think at a certain point, or there are moments where you probably do lose patience and maybe want to give up, or but you still have to keep continuing. What tip?
Oh, great. I mean, by patience, do you mean the ability to wait calmly? I don't have that ability. I'm terribly impatient. I'm a jerk as far as speed, and it's really annoying to be around me, honestly, because I move very, 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 very fast. But then there's that patience of like, don't yell at other people, okay? And I'm pretty good at that. Like I'm pretty respectful for people, but don't get in my way if you are like I'm a jerk. Like if there's a problem that needs to be solved and I don't feel the person who's got responsibility for that problem is solving it quickly enough, I will drive them nuts.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it is a quality that I know I have and in many cases suffer for it. So no, I don't think patience is something you need to worry about.
Okay.
I would just leave sparks off the guardrail.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Woohoo. Okay, hold on a second. Where am I? Okay, let's go up to, let's see another question. Okay. Ellen Fisher. Is Ellen still on? Nope, maybe not.
Yep, no, I'm here.
Oh, okay, Ellen.
Hi, how are you? I
Hi.
wanted to ask what you consider 3 traits for success.
Well, depends what you mean by success. So I only deal with entrepreneurship in my book, and I try to do that in my career now. But entrepreneurs are typically not very successful people. They're typically people who fail and fail and fail and fail, and sometimes they never succeed. But when they do succeed, they tend to have these really outside results, you know? So $1 invested in Square would return $1,000, you know, actually probably more now. But, you know, the number I used to kick around was, oh, if you'd given me $1 in 2009, I would have given you $1,000 back, you know, 7 years later. So, so that's sort of an entrepreneurial payback. But most people consider success just doing something that society approves of in a way that society approves of, in which case you don't be an entrepreneur. Like, don't try something new, just copy something else that works. And then you'll have a lot of friends and you'll have a lot of help. And then if something doesn't go right, you can pay a consultant or somebody and they'll fix it. I don't like, I don't say I don't like that. I don't want to limit myself to just doing that. So what I try to concentrate on is stuff that has not been done, which is terrifying. I mean, honestly, it's not pleasant. And there's some tricks, and I tell you the tricks. But the basic idea is that if you're going to do something that has never been done before, it might not work. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work. And if you're uncomfortable without having a guaranteed result, then maybe you could be an entrepreneur. But it's typically not something that, you know, makes you successful. Unless, of course, you solve the problem, in which case, whoa, you know.
Great. Thank you.
So awesome. Hold on one second. Now I'm working on the questions. Alrighty. Alrighty. So, Ann Jamel.
Hi.
Hi, Ann. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Jim. This is Ann Gemmel. We met a year ago when you came to Philly to talk about Launch Code. And
Oh, God. Hey, yeah.
Hey, I'm so glad that you did Launch Code. It solves a big problem. I hope it's like up and running in Philly. But anyway, I wanted to talk to you about, you know, the problem solving. I loved your talk today around trust and technology and problem solving. And I feel I've identified a problem. It's a really big problem. And if I could solve this problem, it would have a lot of, I think, positive impact in government and policy making. And it's basically identifying the problem that government and technologists really aren't talking to each other enough or more frequently. And so I'm interested in your philanthropy and your advice around best practices for quote unquote pitching tech philanthropists or angel investors who would best understand this problem. And is it any different from traditional philanthropists? There's a lot of, you know, very, you know, visionary entrepreneurs that now are looking to give away money. And it's very different from how, you know, grants have been made in the past. There's disruption going on in philanthropy even. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts about what are the best practices related to this new kind of philanthropy that I'm sure you have a lot of expertise in.
So two things. First of all, most of the people who piled up that much money, you know, like Gates is the classic example, but there are 100 others. I mean, Mike Bloomberg's given away a lot. So, but most of those people are first generation entrepreneurs. They're wealth earners, which means they didn't inherit their money, which means they got it by essentially being badass business people. And they will invest the same way. Like that DNA doesn't change. It changes over time. Like if you look at the Ford Foundation over like a century, they've gotten way more bureaucratic. But the new entrepreneurs that have funded these sort of massive new pools of sort of philanthropic capital, they still invest that like they're running a startup that has to beat a bunch of other startups. So the magic with those people is you pitch them the exact same way they used to be pitched when they ran Bloomberg or Microsoft or anything else. And you can actually lean in to the whole competitive advantage. So the scrappier and the more aggressive you are with your metrics, demos, you know, just any sort of crazy stuff you can do, you will get more attention from them and probably better results. Yeah.
Thank you.
So what's the bottom line? They value aggression more than process. Typically in philanthropic, you know, if you're raising money for 501c3, you know, it's process, banquet, process. You know, we didn't do any of that crap at Launch Code. Like we just started training people for free and then getting them jobs. And then we caught the attention of the Obama administration, who tried to give us some money, but then went through a government channel that didn't work. So then we raised a little bit, but basically we've been just hyper aggressive. And I think that's helped.
Okay. Oh my God. I just realized there was one album going, oh my God, where everybody's so engaged. But there was some great questions on culture I see in there. Julie Boardman, if you want to ask that question, because I love it. I think it's really good.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jim.
Julie.
You were talking about VCs and investing, and I am curious, how important is culture when investors are choosing where to put their money? What's your thought on that? And I was thinking especially not at the very early stages, right? I was thinking more Series C, Series D kinds of funding.
So the bigger rounds, the institutional rounds, are more about growing the product, and culture tends to be set very early. So your culture is essentially going to be set. The rule of thumb is 15 people. Once you have 15 people in the company culture is largely established. Now you can still do stuff to screw it up, but it's actually very difficult to change, either positively or negatively at that point. So now if you've got a C or D round, you're looking at a company that's probably got over 100 or maybe more employees. Culture is really interesting because there are different cultures that support different types of businesses. So if your business is a traditional business, and by the way, there can be traditional business startups, right? So if you're doing a SaaS model, that's a traditional business now, okay? And there's certain things that the VCs will look for, and if you fit their stereotypes, you will be much more likely to raise money. If you're, but what the smart investor is looking for is a fit between the way the culture works and what the company needs to do, okay? So Square has always kept this pretty scrappy culture, even though we got 3,000 people. You know, we're still doing hackathons. We're still, you know, Jack goes off on tweet stuff and the board goes, you know, like we're all doing stuff relatively similar to the way we did it 10 years ago. But that works in a company that's trying to keep, that tries to keep cranking out new products. It would not work in a different culture or in a different company. But it's an excellent question. It's something they look at, but again, there's not a checklist for culture because it has to match what the company has to do.
Awesome. All right, guys, we are so out of time, but this has been, Jim, you have been amazing. You've been absolutely amazing.
Great question.
Well done, man. Well done.
Oh, the questions were amazing. The questions were unbelievable. But hey, I wanted to thank everybody for coming out and chatting with Jim. His book is so incredible, and please buy his book. It's The Innovation Stack: Building an Unbeatable Business, One Crazy Idea at a Time. We have a link. Nellie will put the link to the bookstore that we partner with, because we like to support independent bookstores. They're all over the country, and we help to support those that are in our cities. So we want to make sure that we're supporting them and get Jim to the bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list. But also follow Jim. Follow us. We're working on, we're staying in touch with you for the next big thing, the next big speaker. We'd love your ideas and input on anything that we do or any ideas that you might have for us to go forward. Please hang out to listen to DJ Argo for a bit, and we'll see you soon. So bye, everybody.